Welcome in. Good weekend. Hopefully everybody's having a great one. And as those summer MCAT dates roll around, I hope everybody is keeping that momentum up. Let me get the stream started over on this side as well. All right. Okay, and I think we are good to go on both the TikTok and the YouTube side. Welcome in, guys. If you are new here, my name is Matt. I'm a fourth year med student, soon to be MD, very, very soon to be MD. And I am one of America's most experienced MCAT tutors. So I've been helping people for actually kind of a long time, over a decade, to get into medical school. So drop those questions here if you have them. Let me leave a little welcome message. Welcome, drop an MCAT question or a med school app question, or visit mcatboss.com for personal help applying or acing the MCAT. All right. And over on the TikTok side, same thing here. And feel free, guys, to drop those comments, drop those questions here. We are headed into the summer months. We're only going to be on for a little bit today. We're rapidly approaching crunch time for those of you who are taking, May or June MCATs. If you are taking a May or June MCAT, let me know how you are doing in those final weeks of prep. I know everybody's tends to be a little bit kind of on edge with May and June MCATs. The majority of students who are taking an MCAT before July usually are applying to med school that same cycle. And so understandably, when people are going into their May and June MCAT, a lot of people are a little tense because in most cases, people are taking the MCAT for an application that has either already gone in or is about to go in. And this can often feel like a little bit of kind of a last ditch effort. So, I'll drop those questions in here. While we are waiting, we'll do a couple of quick Q&A type questions here. Let me see here. All right. And first question in says, would you retake the MCAT if I got a 517 but averaged 521 on the full lengths? So I always try to be a little bit how can I put this? When students ask me questions about retaking and they've already scored above a 515, I try to kind of answer in a way that gives it the seriousness it deserves. And by seriousness it deserves, I usually mean that with a little bit of lightheartedness, because for the majority of people, if you score above a 515, the idea of retaking it is pretty much silly. And I don't mean this as a diss if anybody is genuinely asking that. But my impression of the field, for having done this for a very long time, is that most of the time people are just kind of goofing off if they're asking about retaking and they've scored more than a 515. So, if you've scored above a 515, especially if you've scored, up around that 517, you are actually already in the top bracket that the AMC even monitors. So And the AMC basically brackets your acceptance probability all the way up to a 517. And then they're just kind of like, 517 or above. And what we see generally is that you pretty much cap acceptance rates at around 3 out of 4. So you pretty much cap acceptance rates at around 3 out of 4. This means that for students who score 517 or higher, you're looking at something that in the published data seems to indicate that you have around, say out of 100 students who apply with something like a 517, you might have 75 of those 100 get in. And so at this point, if you are serious and you've scored a 517, your only care in the world is not, why didn't I get a 521? Your only care in the world is, am I writing a good enough essay and a strong enough application? And am I a normal person when I interview for med school? Because if you're presenting yourself well and you're coming across as a normal person during interviews, if you're coming across as a person who has is the kind of person that somebody would want to walk into the room and do a medical procedure or have a rough conversation about the patient's mental health, then yeah, you're good to go, right? All right, okay. Question from Zach says, it says, currently entering my junior year, how can I approach cars, just do passages and read literature? Okay, so Zach, I want to answer your question specifically. And I'll tell you what, this is probably one of the most popular, and shall I say, most popular questions that I get for MCAT section specific questions is how to improve on the cars section. So for those of you who are studying the MCAT, this is the section for the reading comprehension, where you read passages and you're asked a bunch of questions about what they mean and what the author's opinion is and what this would imply and what we can infer from that. And you are right, Zach, in your question where you said, should you read? You should absolutely read. You need to have a pretty fast reading speed to get good at this section. The thing is, if you get there though, once you get there, there are a few things you can do. You can get used to patterns of how they mislead you with wrong answer choices. And you can get used to speeding through the passage to get to the questions and then revisiting the passage. These are the kinds of things you should pay attention to. It is possible to get nearly arbitrarily close to a perfect score in this section if you go back to the passage. Now, for more tips, feel free to let me know. This is one of my 100th percentile sections, and it's a really fun one. All right. Let's see what the next one is. Oh, guys, don't forget, if you're new here, I'm the founder of MCATboss.com. So if you are looking for personal help on anything, just drop a line at MCATboss.com and mention that you want to work with Matt and you saw me on a live, so I can get you a special discount. Even my best friend says, if I get a C+ in general bio, should I retake it? I'm in undergrad. The problem with getting a C+ in general bio 1, that would concern me as a if I were on your medical school admissions committee, I would be less concerned with the fact that there's a C+ on a general bio question that didn't get replaced with an A+. I'd be more concerned with the fact that General Biology 1 is considered one of the easiest, probably the easiest course that you take on the entire prerequisites list. I do understand there are some professors who definitely make it a little bit more challenging. Some professors make it less challenging, but that would be my bigger concern. If you're struggling with Gen Bio, I would certainly look into whether your approach, the amount of study time, if the people you're hanging out with, any of those things, if there's something outside the classroom that's impacting your ability to study, let's maybe figure that out before you worry about retaking bio, because bio 1 is a relatively straightforward class. So organic chemistry tends to be much harder. Some of the upper level classes tend to be much harder, and I would figure that out before worrying about whether you should retake it. All right. Somebody says retaking a 517 to get a 521 is beyond neurotic. Yes. I'm trying to tiptoe around putting a label on it like that, but in all seriousness, like that's hopefully not a serious question. That's all I'll say, is that hopefully that is not a serious question. All right. We have Abdurrahman says, I'm taking OK 1 and 2 this summer. That's gonna be a packed summer. Let's keep in mind that at the end of the tunnel, you won't have to take it again, right? All right, Freddie says, I'm currently scheduled to take MCAT June 13th. I took my first practice exam and scored a 498. Any advice? It was my first practice exam after finishing content. Freddie, so I'm going to give you kind of general advice and then a little bit of just bear in mind. If you want to talk about specifics for what you did for content and why you maybe should not take the exam just yet, feel free to drop me a line in the contact form or at mkitboss.com. But my general advice, if there's anybody else out there in a similar situation to what Freddie is describing here, would be do not take the exam yet. If this is like a recent thing, like if you recently took a full length and scored a 498, unless your goal is to score between a 495 and like a 502, which maybe for some students that's their goal score, but if that's not your goal score, chances are really, 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 really high that you are going to land right there in that sort of mid to lower bracket. And you want to be in a stronger position than that when you're taking the real exam. So my advice would be, if your score is kind of in that range, you might not want to be taking the MCAT just yet. You probably want to wait and take it on a different date when you've had more time to figure out why your score is that low. Now, when we're evaluating why a student is scoring near that 500 mark, a lot of times we have to kind of keep in mind, some students are tripping over the timing. Some students are tripping over MCAT content, like there are genuine gaps in their science. Some students are tripping over the fact that they spent a lot of time doing content, but they didn't get used to the contextual problems that are on the MCAT. And whatever is the reason for you scoring in that range, you want to figure that out before you take the real test. And I really want to remind people, like, there is no sort of magical score leaps. Like I have helped tons of students to over more than a decade of teaching the MCAT to make really big score jumps, but there are specific actual things they do to get those score jumps, right? Everything from strategy changes, like I encourage students to read the question first instead of jumping into the passage first. That's a strategy thing that can help you with timing. But I also push my students really hard to do question bank based learning so that they figure out what their unique individual gaps are. If you don't do this, it doesn't matter if you take 3 practice exams, 5 practice exams, or 10 practice exams, you're going to go in, you're going to score lower than you could if you did something different. It's just the reality of it's just the reality of how the MCAT works. All right, guys. I hope that was helpful. I only plan on being here about 4 more minutes. What's the Sigma says, Freddie, I agree with him. Things to reschedule, but I would at least mid-July. Yeah, that's something, unfortunately, that you do have to keep in mind is if you are if you're not yet in like mid application, like if you haven't turned in an app, and to be honest, even if you have turned in an app, I would still bump it at least to July and give yourself time to figure out why. Okay, you said, so Freddie says, in my case, I left roughly 15 questions unanswered. What do you think? Still some advice? So realistically, this question seems to be implying that, if you had guessed some on those 15 questions, you could have bumped it up a couple points. And it's definitely possible that you could have maybe bumped it up to like a, assuming your guess rate is okay, there's entirely the possibility that you could have bumped it up to like a 500. Again, the question comes down to, is that what you want to do? Right. So if you're planning, if you have a really high GPA and you want to be done with prep and you're okay with getting around to 500, and you score a 500, and then you want to apply, for example, to like a DO program, that actually is potentially an admissible score in the right DO program in the right state with a good GPA. It's possible, right? Now, if you're like, you know what, I don't want to score a 500, I want to score like a 505, or I want to score a 510 or 512 or something, then even if you were, making sure you don't leave any empty questions, the scoring of a 498 or something in that range has a very specific real life indication, and it usually means that the student has not done a lot of practice problems. Just point blank, I almost never meet a student who scores in the 490s and has done a question bank the right way and done enough of it. And so that would be kind of the main thing. A plus is nursing a good major for pre-med. A plus, thank you for the question. My answer for you would be, I don't think that being like a nursing major indicates to most med school programs that you're sure you want to become a doctor. That's kind of the main thing that ends up being a problem when students take that route. Okay. So if you do something like a biology degree where you could roll it into a nursing degree if you wanted to, and you could roll it into pre-med if you wanted to, that can be a safe path. Like if you're genuinely, there's nothing wrong, right, with being unsure if you want to go into nursing versus being a physician. That's totally fine. That's totally understandable. There's nothing wrong with sort of splitting your bets by taking a general variety of science courses. All of those are fine. But when you take a declared nursing major, it definitely looks a little bit more confused to the med school application cycle. So somebody followed up to Freddie and said, I would spam UWorld, create Anki cards, do full lengths last. Yeah, it really is. Freddie, the main thing, right, is if you're jumping into full length exams while you're still scoring in the 490s, most of the time it means that you need to work on practice problems more. That is just the reality of it, right? Let me modify this so people remember. All right, so if you're looking for help prepping for the MCAT, guys, do not forget to drop me a line. I do try to always respond really, really fast to students when they are looking to prep, especially if they're looking to take the exam really soon. And let me see where we were here. So Tepiso says, should I apply even if my MCAT won't get back until July 12th? Okay, that is a great question. I think the miscommunication, the misunderstanding, I guess we could say the unverified assumption that most students tend to kind of operate under is that if they do not have a completed application turned in by whatever time, say June 1st, automatically all the interview spots are already going to be given out, or all the early acceptances are already going to be out. And That's just not true. I would not worry about it at all. I don't think there's anything wrong with a mid-cycle application. Now, should you wait until like September 1st? That's going to be a problem, right? Like, don't wait until September. But there is nothing wrong whatsoever with applying mid-cycle. Now, for me as an MCAT tutor, the more important question is, what are you doing between now and when you take the test to make sure that mid-cycle MCAT pops up on the admissions committee desk and looks like, holy smokes, this applicant is amazing. Like that's what you need to be focusing on. That is the most important thing that you can focus on, is how can you absolutely blow the MCAT out of the water between now and when you take it. All right. Queen Star says, I have a question and I have 1 month left for my exam. I feel like I'm not prepared. So two things here, you can drop a line at mcatboss.com. The general thing I would say, without more details about your situation, is if you need to make more time, reschedule your exam. That is universally going to be my advice to people, whether they like it or not. And I have some rather funny experiences. Make sure you like and follow. If you have not liked and followed, make sure you like and follow so that you can see when I go live, so you can see when I run specials, all that awesome stuff, and when I post MCAT clips. Okay. Queen Star says, what should I do? Let's see. It says, I'm done with topic review. I'm doing practice questions right now. Okay. So generally speaking, for students who are doing practice questions, it usually comes down to one of two things. They're either doing a short question bank like bootcamp.com and MCAT. Again, I am a unapologetic affiliate of Bootcamp because I actually one of their practice exam explainer writers. I'm a huge fan, but they're a shorter question bank, right? They're like maybe 600 to 700 MCAT questions. And then there are the really long, really thorough question banks like UWorld. And I'm not an affiliate of UWorld, but man, I love UWorld question bank for the MCAT. It's only a few $100 and it is really thorough. It's like 3,000 problems, but it takes, for most students, about 3 months to get through. If you're really rushed, you could probably do it in 6 weeks, but it is 100% worth the effort. If you need help and guidance on the latter method and how to get the most out of that question bank, drop a line at mcatboss.com. I do try to hook students up with a very good discount if they book a set of tutoring hours on the same day as the live. So just mention that you saw me here. Jade says, if I got a 501 on my first official try, should I go back to content review stage? So it kind of depends, right? Like, honestly, the majority of students who score a 501 in their first official try are doing a lot better than most students who take their first practice exam, because it is a weird experience. The majority of the time when you're going through that practice exam, what you need to be doing is every single question that you open up, you need to be asking yourself, how would I have gotten this question right? If it was a misuse of time, like if you took too much time reading the passage and you wished you had gone and read the question first, then in that regard, there might be some gains that you can get just from doing questions first. Some students have told me that they've gotten 2, 3, even 4 points from just recognizing that they benefit from reading questions first. That's great. If you have instead the experience of looking at it and saying, oh man, I didn't realize this was I didn't know the topic at all, or I know the topic, but I didn't realize that's what they're even asking. Then you either have a bunch of science gaps, or you have what we call a context gap, which is that you know the topic, but when it's asked in context, you're not used to the other ways the MCAT can ask it. In both of those cases, those students benefit from doing more question banks. If you want more specific help, drop me a line at mcatboss.com and I'm happy to help. C says, pushing my MCAT back a few months was the best decision I made. Yes, I think a lot of students realize that pushing back that MCAT date is super helpful. real quick, guys, I am going to try to wrap it up here in the next few minutes. So drop those questions in or drop a contact form. One of those things. Jade says, reach out. Awesome. Just reminder to everybody, if you do save any hours to work with me, you don't have to use them like same day. You have essentially as long as you need, up to a few months to use any tutoring hours, but any hours that you do book during the same day as I hosted a live, I do a pretty significant discount on the tutoring rate. And I will try to be on here 2.5 more minutes, guys. So drop a question. If you have a question, it is a really hopping busy time in the MCAT world because everybody is kind of down to the wire with prep, with the application cycle coming up. For those of you who are finishing undergrad, congratulations. For any medical students out there who are about to graduate, congratulations. I am finishing up my 4th year, so it is it is coming down to the wire. Everybody's wrapping things up, and for those of you who are applying during pre-med for med school, just keep in mind there is always next cycle, but you want to put your best foot forward whichever cycle you're playing. All right, Jade says, how many points over our target score should we be getting before we're ready for the real thing? So most of the time, the majority of students score plus or minus around 3 points. So a student who scores, say, a 502 on their last 1 or 2 practice exams, most of them will score somewhere in that like 498, 499 up to like 505. That's kind of typical. We rarely see a student who, for example, scores a 502 on their practice exams and then goes out and bumps a 512 on their real exam. That's just not super likely. Now, the smart thing to do is what Jade is mentioning here about getting more points on your practice exams than the real thing, and then going and taking it, right? So if your aim is to get a 508, if you're like, you know what, I want to apply with a 508, then waiting until you're scoring around like a 511 on practice exams is really smart. It's something I've said before. When it comes to the MCAT, there are no miracles. There really is. There's really no jumping magically 10 points unless you're changing what you did. And that's, of course, what people like me are here for. I've been teaching this for over 10 years, so I help people figure that out. Jade says, that was my issue. I was hitting 500, expecting a 510, got a 501 on the real thing. Okay, that's actually pretty solid. That means that you're scoring right at and actually a little bit above where you were, where you essentially would expect to be. The thing that I try to do when I work with students on nailing down where their sort of critical inflection point is for their scores, is I try to help them figure out, have we absolutely maxed out the strategic approach to time management in order to get you the highest score that you can get with your current knowledge? And it really comes down to some basic stuff like, are we double checking our answer choices for things like extreme language? Are we reading the questions, at least skim reading the questions before wasting too much time on the passages? Are we evaluating how much of this we can get from independent knowledge versus from the passage? Those things can help us max out the score at your current knowledge level. Past that, when students get locked into that 495 to 505 range, it does usually reflect either they have a content gap or multiple content gaps, or they have context gaps, which is they may know the subject, say DNA replication is something they're really familiar with, but they're not familiar with the weird contextual problems or the weird graph interpretation problems or the weird inferential reasoning process that the MCAT tends to actually test, because the MCAT doesn't really tend to test direct recall. Like the MCAT usually doesn't just say, hey, what's the fundamental dogma of biology? And then you look down and you see DNA to RNA to peptide, and you say, that's the thing. That's the thing that they're testing. It usually doesn't ask it that directly. Instead, it buries it in the context. And so it's because it's not a direct recall. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's not direct recall. Now, there are things you can do to learn how to assess them in a passage. These are the kinds of things that I spend most of the time when students are working one-on-one with me. I usually am focused on guiding them through the process of like, here's how we approach it. We open it up. We look for what they're asking. And then we start to evaluate this ladder of what is the actual source for the information. Where do we go and get it? If it's in the passage, what makes us know that that's the thing we're looking for? And so on and so on. Follow-up question says, then you think it's so hard, but then when you review, you know the content, just not in that verbiage. Yes. So what you're running into is this very frequent event that happens where students feel like when they finish reviewing a problem, they didn't learn content. They knew the thing that the problem explanation says they didn't know. And it leaves students with this feeling of like, hey, if I studied this and I knew when I reviewed it, it's the actual content I already knew. Why did I not get it right? And in some cases, it's that they used synonymous language, and that's not uncommon. In fact, this is so common. This falls under what I refer to as like test writers tricks. It's one of the things that I try to teach students is the kind of tricks that are used to make answers that are right sound like they're not. There is a bag of tricks that test writers use to do that. And when you become more familiar with them, it can kind of gamify the process, and it helps students to realize what they're doing before you actually pick the wrong answer. But it does require focusing on that almost as much as you're focusing on content. So if you really truly are strong in your content, then the next step is to get strong on the context, get used to the contextual exam, get used to the ways that they trick you, and get used to reviewing your test, not just for the content you missed on a practice exam, but for the context that tricked you into picking the wrong answer. And unfortunately, the majority of students do one of two things when they are reviewing their exams. They either go, okay, that problem number 27 should have either been A instead of D, or I scratched out A and I shouldn't have. Okay. And then they move on. And they haven't really learned anything that's useful to them for the next time. Or they assume it's just content, right? They're like, hey, it said this was about DNA replication. I'm going to go study DNA replication. And they go study DNA replication again. And in some cases, they haven't learned anything new because it wasn't the problem in the first place. They actually knew DNA replication as a topic, but they didn't know that the terms used in those questions could sound slightly different. They didn't know that there were other ways of saying an RNA sequence. Well, that indicates that the gene got transcribed, or they'll say an mRNA transcript, or they'll say peptide expressed, and they're all saying that this gene got activated. But they don't realize that MCAT will substitute one phrase for another. These are all things you have to start looking for when you're practicing, when you're reviewing your practice exams. All right. The next one says, what advice do you give for people who take so long to review? It takes me so long, almost a week to. I see people say they do it in a day or two. That is a really, really, really great question. This is actually, I would say that if you are taking several days to review a practice exam, I can almost guarantee you're getting way more out of it than the people who say that they're only reviewing it for a day or two. I find that a lot of students actually do, it is almost a waste of time. It is almost a waste of time to go and do a practice exam if you're only going to review it for like 3 hours afterwards. Like you've wasted the test. Do you want to use it as a metric for how you're prepared you are? That's fine. If you can get a little bit of a ballpark, like if you get a 510 instead of a 505 or something, sure. But if you want to actually learn why you got it wrong, you should sit with it for a couple days. All right. Brandon says, do you do any step 1 tutoring? I do. Drop me a form. And I will be just really transparent with you, Brandon. The majority of what I do when I tutor for step 1. So guys, this is USMLE boards. It's the first part of the board exams. The majority, as a person who's graduating with my MD in a couple of weeks, I'm very excited that I don't have to go through that again. But yeah, step 1 it's a little bit like a Jew step MCAT. It's a great test. It's a little yes, thank you. It's a thing. The majority of the time when I am tutoring for step 1, I am usually not trying to be the like source of knowledge for all step 1 content, right? Like I know people who do step 1 tutoring who essentially they work on getting 60, 70 hours of sit down time with their students to try to like reteach all of the fundamental science. And like, oh man, I mostly focus on teaching you how to study for it. And there are some very specific things that we do to essentially use things like the UWorld Step 1 bank, and that is the way to ramp up your score. But there's a good way to use it and there's a bad way, and we essentially talk about that a lot. Latoya says, when I get a UWorld question wrong, I just read the explanation on that question. Is that okay? It takes me forever to review 20 questions at a time. So that is a really great question. I assume for Latoya, I assume that you are talking about UWorld for the MCAT. If you're talking about step 1 or step 2, okay, yes, for the MCAT. Now, so UWorld is a wonderful question bank, very good, thorough answers. The majority of students who I tutor who end up doing really, really well on the MCAT do go through a question bank like UWorld. I'm a huge fan of the UWorld question bank. I'm going to actually probably answer this in the direct opposite way from what you might be expecting. And that is that I actually encourage students to not only take their time reviewing it, I actually encourage students to review every single separate question individually. So I don't even encourage students to take them in blocks of 20. I encourage students to take them in blocks of, well, you can set it up as blocks of 20 or 30 or 40, but I encourage you to take it in tutor mode untimed and review every single separate question and figure out what you did wrong, what you misunderstood, figure out if you didn't know the content, if you need to read the explanation, if you did a calculation wrong. Like you want to evaluate that with every single separate one. So very good question. Don't sweat how long it takes. It should actually, the misunderstanding is this, and I'm going to kind of wrap it here because I gotta wrap up the live here. So for further questions, drop a line at mkboss.com. But the general thing to remind students of is that if they feel like they're going slowly through an MCAT question bank, it's usually a good thing, because it usually means that you are treating the question bank experience like it is your actual study time. And that is how you're supposed to use a question bank. Too often students interact with a question bank like it's a practice exam. Then they sit down for an hour and they bust through a bunch of problems, and then they go, I got 64% of them right. And that is a problem. Question banks are not engineered to be practice exams. They're not engineered to be this overview cross-sectional representation that should scale to a particular score. They're not like that at all. They're supposed to be a very, very specific one-by-one opportunity for you to see each separate topic and figure out if you know it well enough to take it on the MCAT. And if you don't, to fix it. And that is your study process. That's what I teach, right? I kind of figure out where the student is going off of the road, off the ladder, and we go from there. All right, guys, I hope that was helpful. I'm going to leave it up for about 30 more seconds, and I will go ahead and wrap it up on the, looks like we have gotten to the bottom of the questions on YouTube, so we'll stop it there.